Hello, welcome to Mark Langley's Horsemanship Podcast, a podcast helping people to understand their horses better, to provide solutions in a calm, connected way. I'm Jenny Barnes.
And I'm Mark Langley.
Mark, I know you've been travelling all the way around Victoria and south of New South Wales, working extremely hard the last few weeks. I just thought I'd share this with you. This has just come in from Barra. Mark saved my life. He's exactly what I was looking for in my approach to horses. I'm utterly grateful for every piece of information and knowledge from this amazing horseman. Right, we'll get straight into the questions then. Hi Mark, today's questions for you are all about retraining a horse. So for the people listening, you might have a horse and you've been sort of using certain training methods, or previous owners have used training methods that might be the common traditional methods that are out there, and you're wanting to move away from them. And so this week is all about how Mark can help you sort of move away from, start to do different things. So Mark, first of all, I want to ask you, this question comes from Kathleen. How do you approach retraining a horse that has a negative learned response? So an automatic response to perhaps something like pressure that's been unintentionally conditioned. They might overreact, they might respond incorrectly. How do you recondition that brain so that they no longer feel that pressure, or that set of circumstances leads to them reacting inappropriately? How do you change it so that they're conditioned mentally to do something different? Have you got any sort of how does it work? Can you just give us a bit of an oversight?
Yeah, it's common at clinics that I get a lot of horses that anticipate pressure in a negative way, in the sense of they try and make a decision to avoid or get away from the pressure. So they, I call them release hunters. So they get anxious about the pressure. So basically I would give a horse an alternative to what they were going to do. If you see what they're going to do, say, and most of those negative pressures are, I'm moving away from something, or I'm scared of something, I'm moving away from the undesirable pressure, opposed to going towards their thoughts. So if you see any response where the horse is kind of anticipating or moving away from something, you reset it, whether you put a feel on the rope or something like that to say reset, and ask again, without being specific about what is exactly happening with the horse. I won't be too specific with the answer, but basically the horse has to feel good about, or better about, what it's doing and be able to follow a feel. So depending on the pressure, so if it was a pressure of, sending a horse somewhere, if you sort of shook a flag and the horse decided to run away from the flag, then you would offer the horse another alternative to that. So if you shook the flag a little bit, the horse got anxious and went into a robotic sort of lunging response, then I would pick up on the rope and I'd say that's not working. And when the horse sort of followed the rope a bit, even if it followed the rope towards me, I'd take the flag away a little bit and say, when I shake the flag, you can search, but don't run away from it in an automatic response. If the horse was running away from my legs, for instance, and I was putting legs on, and the horse was getting all anxious and rushing forward, then I'd slow it down. I'd sort of back it up a little bit, and then I'd ask quietly, can you move softly off my legs? And I'd go right back to asking for one very small step, instead of sort of rewarding a sort of a fast, destinating response. But there's so many different things that we can do. But basically, when there's a negative feeling to pressure, we have to just offer the horse an alternative that's going to make them feel better.
Okay, so sticking with that then, so Megan has a specific scenario for you. So she's got a horse that's has started to want to bite when her feet go in the stirrups to mount, or when legs are applied in the saddle. And he objects to the girth being tightened, even though this is done very slowly. And he hasn't sort of been used with a lot of legs. So I think she's been following your approach with using the one rein start and things like that. She's just going through this, making sure that the saddle is fitting, that it's not enough, there's no soreness there. So assuming that there's no medical problem, she's just wondering what your suggestions might be to move forward from this negative response.
So with anxious or anxiety around the girthing area, legs, where your legs go and everything like that, it's usually why that starts is because once upon a time the horse had to stand still and be girthed up and put up with something that it possibly didn't like until it started to, even it's like the feeling of being backed into a corner, so if you're tied up and someone's poking and prodding you, you're going to tense up and be nervous. So in the early stages of training, some horses aren't aggressive when you do certain things around the girth. They just freeze and they get a little nervous. And because they're not doing anything major, we just sort of, get on with what we're doing. But then after a while, that freeze cause could turn into like, I don't really like that. I don't like it. I was nervous and frozen a year or so ago, but now I'm actually not so frightened anymore, and I'm not frightened of you. And actually, I don't like it, and I don't know what to do. But it's not a good feeling. So, and it's the same with leg pressure. So basically, what I try and sort of offer horses is an alternative to them feeling bad and sort of freezing up and getting irritated and sort of biting and things like that. So an alternative would be through movement in a lot of cases. So if you can find an alternative through movement, then you can actually move the horse until it starts to soften and feel good. So basically, there's two ways of looking at girthing. You can do the approach and retreat, where you go in and wait a little till the horse softens, then release the pressure. Go in slow with the girth, wait a little till the horse softens, and then release the pressure and do that. Or you can, girth up a bit of pressure on your horse, or we'll say not with the girth. This would be more with a belly rope, and ask the horse to lead to that pressure. So something I do with horses that are sort of quite chronic around the girth is I'll put a belly rope on them, and at a bit of a distance, I'll stand out in front of the horse with the longer belly rope with a bow line around it, so I can sort of tighten up, but the pressure is going to pull forward to ask the horse to lead forward. Is I would stand at a distance in front of the horse, and I'd pull the rope, and the horse is going to tighten up, get a little bit angry, but you're not standing there to bite, so it's going to be like, oh, I wonder what I'm going to do. I'm not really sure about this. And you just keep a little feel on that girth, and if you wanted to help the horse with head pressure, you could. And when the horse tightens up and gets a bit anxious, hold with that forward pressure, and then ask the horse to lead forward a bit, so you can use a bit of pole pressure too to help the horse. And when the horse moves forward and releases the brace in its feet and just changes that angry thought a little bit, you just loosen the girth pressure. And then you ask again until you can also lead the horse just with the girth pressure, and it'll lead forward and come off that pressure. And what will happen is the horse will get tight, they'll get angry, they'll tense up, and then they'll move a little bit, and then they'll soften a bit, and then they'll move a little bit, and then they'll soften a bit, until eventually you'll girth up and they'll softly move, opposed to have any tension. And that's giving them an alternative that obviously makes them feel better. Because most times when you're trapped in a corner and you can't move, that's when you're going to be feeling more vulnerable. So if I was to walk into your space and poke you on the nose, you would feel intimidated. But if you were to walk into my space and poke me on the nose, you're still coming into my space, and we're still crashing into each other's space, except you're less intimidated because you're coming into me. So by making a horse stand still and doing lots of handling around them and girthing, they feel like they're sort of, you've come into my bubble and all these things are on me. Whereas if you get them moving and you're more neutral, then the horse will be a lot softer and less aggressive. So basically, when you see some softness when you're doing that belly rope up and you're pulling it forward and the horse moves forward softly, then and it can lead forward, then you lead it forward into a position where you're going to girth it. And when you girth, you go straight up with the belly rope. So when you do the girthing, you just handle quietly. So after the horse has softened to the leading and going quite well, then you might just soften and just gently do the girth up and just, watch for a little bit of tension. If you see some tension, loosen up. But if you still think there's a lot of tension, I'd go back to the leading with the belly rope and going to your legs and getting on your horse and putting your foot in the stirrup. Something I would do was, as I gently put my foot in the stirrup, and if you're on the mounting block, I'd ask your horse to lead around soft, and then I'd just gently put my foot up in the stirrup area, and then I'd just say step back, step forward a step, and just distract that thought of the horse, coming around, getting a little aggressive on your boot. And then as soon as the horse follows the feel and listens to that rein, then just take your foot out and just say thank you for that, because once again, you're offering the horse an alternative to what it was doing. So you're effectively changing its thought through a distraction, and that distraction gets its mind off that hard thought. And sometimes if you can just give them an alternative to what they were doing, they'll start to let go of the worry about the thing that they were concerned about. It's because they've been doing it all the time. They keep thinking it. But if you offer them an alternative distraction, then eventually they'll stop thinking about how they don't like you putting your foot in the stirrup. But if it's definitely some irritable areas there on the horse, then the softly leading with the belly rope and stuff like that starts to get the horse to soften in the rib cage and get more comfortable with it. So then when you get to the riding and you put legs on, the horse is used to a bit more compression on that rib cage and able, to move forward to that. And by the sounds of it, you've already led your horse around with the reins in a sense, so that you've found movement in the reins. So if you found movement in the reins when you get to riding and adding leg to your horse, the best thing I would sort of do is don't use the reins when you start to do leg transitions. So you put leg on and the horse can turn back or go wherever it wants as long as it goes forward. So basically don't try and point and shoot the horse in a certain direction, because then you're shoving the horse along with the legs. You're kind of pushing it like a wheelbarrow. But if you just sort of add legs and the horse can go wherever it wants, it's just an accelerator, not a I want you to go there tool. The reins are more to get a horse to go somewhere. The legs are just to accelerate. And if you've already done a lot of leading the horse around with the reins, then basically what's going to happen is the horse has already let go of the strong thoughts, because basically you can steer and it can go in a straight line, steer and go in a straight line. So it's already got movement. So then all you have to do is stop it, loosen the rein and say, go again with the legs. And after a while, instead of sort of biting back at you, the horse will go forward. Usually horses bite back at the legs is because the person's pointing them away from where they want to go and then kicking them at the same time. And that's when they get a lot of aggression towards the legs, because it's almost like they're getting shoved along all the time. But if you've worked separately with the reins and then legs without reins, and the horse can go wherever it wants when it accelerates, the legs are almost like a helper for the horse opposed to a shover. And then they'll get a lot softer to that.
So it's not like if they're having these sort of negative response to the legs that we completely ignore the legs and leave them alone. You're actually saying, no, work on the legs, but actually don't do the rein work for a while.
Yeah. So the rein work's designed to get the horse freely thinking in new directions, and almost like every direction becomes equal. So you can point your horse in any direction and it's equal. And that means the horse has let go of a strong destination or a strong magnetism. And once it's let go of that, then you basically just work on acceleration, because the horse is in more of a neutral centered state instead of it being destinating and then working on the legs while it's wanting to be somewhere else. But at least by separating the two tools, the horse is understanding which one it's listening to, and it's going to learn it more thoroughly.
Right, okay. So I want to get your opinion now on this, Mark, just to see which way you think that this owner should go. She's got a really young gelding, sweet, personable, trusting, willing, calm, an old soul. I think that's a lovely description. But he has white spots on his back from the prior owner's saddle and white horizontal scars on both sides. No idea what caused those. He has bucked completely out of the blue. And because it was such a huge change mentally from one state to another, his trainer thinks it might well be pain related. So she's going to get x-rays done. But in the back of her mind, Kathleen is wondering, could this be a pain response to the saddle, or perhaps a memory sort of response? Or is it that under certain situations, this is reacting to pressure? Do you have any thoughts on that, Mark?
Yeah, well, pain responses obviously can be quite, like if a nerve tweaks or something like that can cause an explosion. And I guess you have to sort of rule that out by getting, the appropriate people in to have a bit of a look over the horse and work out if it's a pain response. But pain responses can also look a little bit like a horse that goes from frozen to sort of bucking, in the sense of it can go from one extreme to the other. I get the hardest thing is about it is like there's an example of a horse at the last clinic, and I'll use that as a bit of an answer for you. It's a horse that I'd helped before and opened up from a frozen response, but in the clinic on the first day I worked at, or the second day, I put the saddle on and I noticed it was in a frozen kind of state. Took me the whole lesson to unfreeze it. The next lesson I brought it in, I was showing people about self-awareness and how the horse was aware of every part of its body. And it was showing me as I was girthing it how it was feeling about the girthing. So with that particular horse, if you girthed it up when it was kind of just phasing out, chances are if you let it up or trotted it, it'd buck or go kind of a little bit ballistic. But it was missing out on so much. But it would just sort of set into this state of sort of freeze, and it just stopped thinking. As in, I spent a whole lesson getting it to search and look away and travel. And as soon as it look away and start to search, as its head would go to the ground and it'd sniff the ground and do the big, I'm breathing, I'm thinking, and so just in the saddling, because I put the saddle on, it froze so much that I spent the whole rest of the lesson getting it to open up its mind and look in different directions and sort of be aware of the place it was in, and also what I was doing, and the things where I was moving the flag to or myself to, or and then in the next lesson the horse came in and I just worked through the whole process slowly, making sure the horse was aware at every moment of what I was doing, and then it stayed open the whole saddling process. So that could be what's happening, and it happens to a lot of horses. So I'd say that I'd put 50% of my bet on the fact that the horse is actually probably has a negative response to pressure and things like that, and started to shut out certain things, but then it's sort of been holding the worry in, and then the worry comes out, so it looks quite explosive, goes from nothing to something. And actually on the same clinic that I'm talking about, there's another horse that was a rearer, and it would look like a calm thoroughbred, but when it came into the arena with the girl who was working with it, who owned it, it was just going to straight full rearing and everything like that. But then on other days, you could say be as calm as a cucumber. So it's a horse that doesn't know how to deal with anxiety. When the cup's full, it just sort of tips out and tips over. So I think it's really important to sort of see if your horse is actually slightly frozen and obedient. And to do that, what I would do is when you're saddling and doing things like that, see if you can interrupt its thoughts just a little bit. So if you're putting a saddle on and girthing, or the things that kind of make it like stimulate that sort of I'm going to be frightened or buck or do something, as you're saddling, just see if you can pick up a feel on the horse, and it'll just think around and sniff and breathe. See if you, and also listen for shallow breathing. Like if the horse gets so tight in the face and the muzzle and wrinkled, the breathing's quite shallow, and you see a stillness in the ears where the ears are cut back a little bit, and sort of the tops are a bit pointed together. If they're kind of quite still when everything's happening and very obedient looking, and but they look a little like not a lot's happening, then I'd be concerned that it's the horse is just kind of holding in the worry, and then at any moment it could come out. So you're just always gently interrupting the horse's thoughts a little bit, and see if you can sort of get a change or a connection, even if you get the horse to bend a little bit and it connects and breathes on your hand. Also, I'd go around and touch the horse in different places, and if I found a spot before I was saddling it, if I was touching it and there was no response, I might even poke a little harder on the horse, even on its shoulder, and just give it one quick poke. And if the horse goes like jumps a bit like that, then go back to just touching it softly and see if it can start to sort of get aware of the area that you're feeling on it or touching on it. That's even another way to get them, work over their body to make sure that they know where you are. Just like when you see a horse and there's flies landing on it and it goes, shakes that fly off back there, and it shakes a fly off there with its skin, how it ripples. They're aware of where the flies land on them. Like a fly lands on its leg and it'll pick up its leg and stamp it or something. But sometimes when we're saddling the horse, we can't get a response out of any part of their body, because they're just kind of in that state of freeze. So I would try and sort of just do a bit of research on your horse, and see if it can be aware, like of every part of its body. If you just back at its hip and you're rubbing on its hip, if you just rock it or tap it, can it just loosen that leg, that hind leg where you're at, and things like that. And is the horse looking back? Is it sort of aware of down that side, or is it just standing the same robotic position? So yeah, I'd be doing things like that around your horse and having a good look at what's happening to find out if it's just a holding in the anxiety and then it's exploding versus pain.
Well, Kathleen, let us know how you're going, because I know you're going to get that x-ray done, and it'd be interesting to see how you progress from here, so keep in touch with us. Mark, the next question is from Claudia, and this is about a younger horse, a 3-year-old mare who is just getting started. Now, Claudia's been sort of trying to get her attention with the flag, and this particular mare isn't very impressed by it, and it seems that she doesn't see much sense in the things that she's asking her. So she's getting heavier and heavier and a little bit annoyed at the same time. She's a very curious mare. She likes to be looking for food. Whether she's used to looking for food, I'm not quite sure. But she usually lets her investigate when she's got her in hand, and they do a lot of walking together. But she's generally heavy on her feet and heavy in her shoulder. So the swishing of a stick or the smacking of a rope on the ground, when she stops to eat or something, she'll sort of look at it politely the first time, and then the second or third time she'll just ignore it. So not impressed by it, and doesn't seem to have much of an impact on her. She's at the bottom of the herd, but she's wanting to sort of get her to train her in the way that she can, get these sort of tools working. Have you got any tips for her on?
Yeah, I think in a whole, it's going to be a fairly simple sort of direct answer, this one, in the sense of we could go on a long about sort of, this and that and the other, but I think my thoughts on it is the old saying of Tom Dorrance's field timing and balance. You've got to get the balance right, firstly. So what it seems like to me is she's able to search, she's able to explore, you've allowed that, but then she also has to understand boundaries as well. So, searching without boundaries can be dangerous, because when you want to put a boundary in that's clear and you want the horse to understand it, they can get a little bit of a shock or a fright, or they can get overwhelmed later on when there's more pressure. So, allowing a horse to go towards its thoughts is very important. But then the next thing is the horse has to let go of that thought. So if she's exploring and you want to draw her back and say, come back now, let's go over here, or do something else, follow the rein, whatever, follow the lead rope, whatever, you have to get her to let go of that thought. By the sounds of it, she's getting good at being a toddler and hanging on to her thoughts. But it's like a toddler without boundaries. You take their toy and they scream, they get really angry. And it's only later on, through learning. And some toddlers learn better through trial and error. The little toddler that falls off the edge of a little veranda, not a big veranda, next time it crawls to the edge and goes, I'm not going to fall off that edge anymore. So it found its own boundaries in a sense, and the boundaries were clear. So by the sounds of it, she's on toddler mode, and she's not knowing that there's any boundaries out there. So the popping of the flag is not meaning a lot by the sounds of it. So you can get on the end of the rope and sort of get firm enough to make a change if you need to. One bump of a rope or one thing that's clear enough is not going to be going to affect her a lot in the sense of, causing long-term trauma or anything like that. What causes problems is leaning on medium pressure for a long time. That's what causes that big brace in the shoulders, in the front feet being heavy, is that leaning into pressure. So I think with her, you might have to sort of show her what the end of the rope means. So when she goes out on the end of a rope, you might put one clear bump in it that makes her reset, and it might make her eyes open up and go, hang on, what was that? And it's like, well, that was the end of the rope. That's a boundary. And then she'll start to recognize that, that means something. There is a boundary there. But the longer you go with medium pressure without change, the more she can go, I can hold on number 5 worth of pressure. Well, I can hold on number 10 and I don't have to make a change. That means you have to get higher or bigger with the pressure. So basically the saying is you've got to apply enough pressure to get them to let go of whatever they were doing, whatever that may be. So you don't just swish a flag to get their attention. If you had the flag, for instance, so someone says, my horse is not really interested in the flag, but I'll get a hold of the flag and I'll just sort of, hang it over the left ear and then hang it over the right ear and then just gently walk the flag back over there with her, and it'll just be hanging over there with her. The horse goes, wonder what's going up there. And then just out of the blue, I'll do this big shake of the flag and they'll go, geez, where'd that come from? And they'll wake up and go, I wasn't expecting that. That was like the stealth magpie that I wasn't expecting. And then they'll start to have their own natural awareness then. So she's probably also got used to your rhythm and when you do things, and she knows when she's going to block out. So sometimes, maybe that you might have to give her more responsibility by doing something a little more random so that she wasn't expecting. And then she'll start to go, hang on, I wasn't expecting that. I might have to pay attention in my environment, not just sort of assume all the time. So that could be I'm walking along and I could do a quick bang with the flag out of the blue. And at the same time, I bumped the rope a little bit and she went, what was that? I wasn't sure what that was. And then you just might go, oh, well, I just might walk over here. And she'll go, oh, where'd that, I might follow you. And show her that sometimes things aren't always what they seem and she should pay a little bit more attention. And that's not going to hurt her at all. It's only when people get bullying on their horses and pushing them around and shoving them and pushing them and chasing them and getting heavy on them all the time that the horse gets kind of sour or they get frightened. But clear pressure where it's necessary to create clear boundaries is okay as long as you get the desired response where the horse has a thought change. But when the horse is centered and it comes back and it goes, okay, I'm centered, I'm here, it knows by your intention that you've got good intention towards it and it can be connected to you. So you're not using that bump on the rope or that pop of the flag towards the horse. It's just that's the rope, that's the end of the boundary. I've popped the flag to get your attention, but my body language is not after you with it. And I think just more clarity in your boundaries is going to be so important, and do something that's big enough to get her to let go of that thought. And then when she has, don't ask anything of her, just say, thanks for that. And just let her quietly think about that. And then you just go on and do something else. So she's got to follow your idea just as much as you can follow her idea when you're getting her to search and things like that. But as I say, she's got to let go of her ideas quite willingly, not fight it to keep her idea, because then one day when her idea is to canter behind 5 horses and then those horses go into gallop and you don't want to, she's going to go, well, I am, because I hang on to my thoughts and I don't let go of them. So eating grass can be dangerous because they're hanging on to a thought that could potentially be, oh, well, I'm going to go and kick that horse, or I'm going to bolt. So if you can't get a horse to let go of a small thought like eating grass, then you maybe won't get them to let go of a bigger thought.
No, that's so interesting. So being clearer in your response and maybe taking a little bit more of a leadership role. That's what I'm getting from you with helping clients.
Yeah.
So I know there's a few videos of you where you sort of will walk off in different directions, and all of a sudden, instead of it being, you're almost waiting for the horse to choose the direction, the horse has to pay attention to you. It's 100% paying attention to you in this lesson. Yeah. I might just send the link to her for that one, because I think that would be a good one for her.
Yeah, and just quickly on that is. I say this to everybody because the more we try and listen to our horses, the better we'll become at listening. But sometimes I see people fall in the trap of if they become an observer and a listener, so everything is all about what their horse is doing, and then they lose their own centre. So you're allowed to be selfish and make your own decisions and walk the path that you want to walk and things like that. And the horse has got to recognise that you own yourself too. And that's so important with those horses. We sometimes over-listen and over-manage. Where we really got to manage ourselves, and the horse starts to look up to us because of that, because they're not going to follow us into the valley of death if we're just focused on them all the time. They're going to look at us as go, geez, you're pretty confident in this environment. I like your confidence. I'd like to be around you.
And with that, I know that sometimes you'll say to people, you've got to have the answer in your head of the question that you're answering. So there's no sort of you're very, very sure about that boundary. So if you're standing there with your horse and your horse is moving to a particular point away from you, but you're actually wanting them to listen to the feel, in your mind, you know where that boundary is, where you go, that's it, you've hit the boundary. So that door isn't open and the horse isn't inching its nose slowly out of that door trying to escape. There's a wall, and they hit the wall and bang. So that clarity is so important, isn't it? That and that comes, like you said, that just comes back to you, that for you to show that clarity to the horse, the clarity must be in you. You must be clear of what that answer is and what your response is going to be, so that they know this is what we're doing. So if they can pick up on whether our mind is with them or not, they can pick up on whether we know exactly what they want them to do or not. So it's fascinating.
Yeah, certainly is.
So this session then we'll just wrap it up. So from what I can get from you, Mark, the retraining, trying to get our horses to sort of think in a certain different way perhaps and have different responses to what we're asking them to do, and not to be worried and show anxiety from traditional sort of pressure that might have been applied. We've got to get them to feel better. That's the first thing. And then we give them an alternative so that they can sort of relax into that, knowing that we're going to do something different. And that could be following a feel into movement. So I hope this session has been helpful and interesting to all of you. Let us know your feedback. And thank you very much, Mark.
Yep, no worries. And just quickly, to wrap one thing up, which I probably didn't say at the start, is pressure is an opportunity, not a threat. And just going back to the first question, when the horse stares at pressure and thinks, what am I going to do to get away from that pressure? They see it as a threat. But if they start to search and look for answers elsewhere, like look away from the pressure and make decisions to go towards their thoughts, then pressure becomes an opportunity. And then when pressure starts to become an opportunity, that's when horses start to soften and feel good about dealing in an environment amongst the pressures of just training pressures and environmental pressures and stuff like that. And it's one of the game changers is teaching horses that pressure is an opportunity, not a threat. But it's quite hard to do sometimes.
Definitely keep an eye on the podcast, because this is a whole separate podcast. That pressure is not a threat; it is an opportunity. We're going to hit Mark. He's going to do a whole separate podcast just on that topic. So look out for it. Stay tuned.
Thank you. Thanks everybody. Thanks Jenny.
You can learn more from Mark and his approach online through his online training videos. Just search Mark Langley Horsemanship. Join hundreds of others around the world making real progress, fixing problems and improving their relationship with their horses. There are now over 500 training videos. Make use of the 7-day free trial and take a look. Membership is just $15 a month, and you get to ask Mark a question.